Good morning, this is Yanti with K1 Risk Management Services, and today I'm going to do a very short tutorial on talking about purchasing of firearms. And so over the last several months, I've been getting a lot of calls and emails about what to look for if they were to purchase a firearm. So there's a lot of people that have a few concerns about Oregon's Measure 114 that is in debate right now. And with that being said, people have concerns about if this measure does pass, is that going to limit what type of firearms that we can carry? Is that going to limit the amount of rounds that we can carry in a magazine? So all of those are a big concern. Again, with that being said, a lot of people are going out right now and purchasing firearms. If you are going to be shopping for firearms, it's important to know what to look for when getting a gun. Now, first of all, I also want you to consider, what are you going to use the firearm for? Is it going to be for concealed carry, or is it something that's going to be used for personal defense at home? Once you determine what type of firearm that you're going to purchase and what the use is going to be, then we're going to start breaking things down a little bit first. First of all, we're going to talk about size of the firearm. Now, there's several different sizes of firearms, and they all kind of have their own specific needs. Now, we're going to start with the smallest one and kind of work our way up from there. Now, this is a subcompact, and even though that there's firearms that are smaller than this one, I just don't have one available to show you. But it starts with a compact firearm, which is smaller than this one. And then it goes up to a subcompact. Pros and cons. A subcompact is a firearm that's really easy to conceal if you're going to conceal the firearm. However, the size of the firearm, as far as it being smaller, makes it a little bit more complicated to shoot. So that may not be a reason why you'd want to get a subcompact, but if convenience is your concern, a subcompact might be the way to go. The next size up is going to be your medium-sized frame, and that's going to be a gun about this size. Now, your medium-sized frame is probably kind of the go-to. You can kind of use this for personal defense at home, and you can also use it for concealed carry. The advantages, controllability. If you have larger hands, then a medium-sized frame gun would be probably the way to go. And even though I carry a medium-sized frame gun most of the time, I can still conceal this firearm pretty easily. So that would be the next size up. All right, so this one is a full-size gun. Obviously, this is going to be one step up from a medium-sized frame. Obviously, it's going to be a little bit more difficult to conceal the firearm this size. However, it gets easier when the guns get a little bit larger and a little bit heavier. Now, even though this is a medium-sized frame gun, this is also a steel frame and a polymer frame. That means that part of the gun is plastic. This particular gun is all steel. That means it's going to add a lot more weight to it, and the recoil management is going to be much easier to maintain than it is a gun that's a little bit lighter in weight. Now, once we go from a full-size gun, then we go to what we call 1911s. And 1911s are all kind of basically very similar in style. They're all very large frame. Most of them are made of steel, much heavier guns, but this is going to be the largest of the handguns. So again, depending on what you're going to be using the firearm for, I would probably recommend staying around the medium-sized frame gun because you have kind of the best of both worlds. You have the ability to conceal your firearm easily, and you have the ability to have recoil management because the gun is a little bit larger, and you can also use it for home defense. So that's kind of your options there. So now we're going to talk about the ease of use of a firearm. Now, remember, not all guns are created equal. Guns have different functions, they have different sizes, they have different accessories, and a lot of us get recommendations for different types of firearms from other people. And really, when it comes to firearms, you have to make sure you pick the gun up, you put your hands on it, you find out what features are on it, and you definitely have to be able to work all the components and or the functions on the firearm. Now, what do I mean? Let's say, for instance, let's talk about the Glock for a moment. Now, the Glock 19, obviously it's a great firearm. It's been around for a long time and it has a lot of history. It's been used by many police forces around the world. However, there are some drawbacks to the Glock firearm, just like, and I'm not just picking on Glocks, I'm just saying there's a lot of firearms that are like the Glock that makes them a little bit more challenging and is not as easy of use as other firearms. For an example, the Glock slides are really difficult to rack. So you have to have the ability to be able to rack the slide on a firearm. And if you cannot rack the slide, and especially if you can't rack the slide and lock it back, then that's probably not the gun for you. At some point, you're going to have to lock the slide back on a gun, whether you're clearing the firearm or cleaning the gun, or just making sure that the gun is in a safe mode. So if you cannot rack the slide, then any gun that you can't manipulate the slide is not the gun for you. Next thing is going to be magazine release. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about magazine release. Now, the magazine release is obviously what releases your magazine from the firearm. And there's going to be a few guns that have various features on how to release the magazine from the gun. Now, this particular gun has a push button magazine release, which basically means that you just push that button and the magazine will fall out. If you have trouble just using your thumb on your shooting hand and just pushing that button and dropping the magazine, then again, that's not the gun for you. That function should be easily accessible by just reaching your thumb forward, maybe doing a little manipulation with the gun, but very little to be able to release the magazine. There's a good chance there's going to be a magazine release during a potential threat with your firearm, and you have to be able to unload and reload that firearm quickly. It's very important that you're able to release that magazine button and get that magazine out of there quickly, and of course reloading. Now, another different feature when it comes to magazine release is this one is a paddle feature, which basically means you push that button down like so, and that will release the magazine as well. This is also ambidextrous, so if you wanted to use your trigger finger to release that magazine release, then that works as well. So look for those features, either a paddle feature where you push the magazine release button down, or a push button feature where you just push the button and release the magazine. Okay, now I also recommend firearms that has a safety feature on the firearm. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about safety features on a gun. Now, especially for new shooters, I do recommend that you purchase a firearm that has some type of safety feature on it. And you just have to decide what safety features are beneficial for you. Some will have 0 safety features, and other guns will have multiple safety features. So you really got to figure out which one works best for you. For an example, if you can see on this firearm, it has 2 triggers. It has a double trigger. That second trigger is a safety feature. That means if I were to just pull the second trigger, the trigger will remain locked. In order to discharge the firearm, I have to be pushing both triggers. So when you see double triggers on a firearm, that is a safety feature, and I think that's a wonderful feature that helps prevent accidental discharge of your firearms. And then you have guns that have what we call a grip safety. And this mechanism in the back does the same thing. As long as the button is out, the trigger is locked, and when you push the button in, from when you squeeze the gun, that deactivates the trigger and takes the safety off. I think that's another great safety feature. So even if you're, putting the gun in your holster and things like that, as long as that button stays out, the safety is on. And then you have some firearms that also have what we call a manual safety. And on this 6-hour P320, the manual safety selector switch is right there. That means that you can carry your firearm with a round in the chamber, which is also referred to as cocked and locked, and you don't have to worry about disengaging the trigger. When you draw the gun, you simply just take your thumb, flip that safety feature off, and of course the gun will fire. So again, that just gives you another ability to carry your firearm with a round in the chamber, and you can carry the firearm in a more safe mode because it has a manual safety. Now also be cautious that some of these safety features, the buttons on the manual safety, this button protrudes quite a bit, and that makes it really easy to flip that safety on and off. There's other firearms that the manual safety is very flush or shallow to the firearm, which makes it very difficult for you to take that safety off. Now, even though it has a manual safety, you want that button to protrude a little bit so it's easily to engage and disengage when you need to draw your firearm in an emergency situation. And then of course, you have what we call decockers. And the decocker is on the top of the slide on this Canic firearm. So what happens is, let's say for instance again, you want to have a loaded magazine and you just rack it and put a round in the chamber. Now, in order, let's say for instance, if you wanted to disengage that trigger, you simply push that decocker lever off, and it basically disengages the striker from hitting the firing pin. Now, when it comes to decockers, there are some guns that when you push the decocker, it will totally disable the gun, and then other guns, you push that button and it'll only disengage the trigger on the first trigger pull. So if you buy a gun that has a decocker feature on it, make sure that you understand the components of it, and does it disengage the gun totally, or does it just disengage the gun when on the first trigger pull? Now, the next thing you're going to decide is if you want to go with a revolver or a semi-automatic, and we'll talk a little bit about the pros and cons. Now, a lot of people like revolvers. As you know, revolvers were the firearms back in the day. Law enforcement used these guns back in the 30s and 40s, and that was basically before semi-automatics really became popular. So here's the advantages and disadvantages. Your revolvers, first of all, simplicity. Once you load a revolver, which is basically just opening up the cylinder, you put in your rounds, you close the cylinder, the gun is ready to shoot. So it's very, very simple. Once the gun's loaded, it's just point and shoot. So that's the advantages of having a revolver, is you don't have other components like safeties and slides and decockers and things like that. So the simplicity is there. The disadvantages is you're only limited to 5 rounds. And if you were to run out of ammo, even with the speed loader, it takes a while to get the empty casings out of the cylinder and reload it with fresh ammo. So those are the drawbacks, is that you're going to be limited to how many rounds that you can shoot, and it takes a while to reload. That's why most people go to a semi-automatic. Now here are the pros and cons to your semis. Your advantages is magazine capacities. Again, with this new measure, if the law passes, we're going to be limited to 10 rounds in the magazine. So again, let's just hope that new law doesn't pass. But magazine capacity is vital in self-defense. Again, you never want to run out of ammo in a gunfight. So I like the advantages of having high capacity magazines. That way I'm just reloading less. The disadvantage to some people is they think that semi-automatics have too many components on them. Decockers, magazine release, changing the magazines. These features to some people are very overwhelming. But look at it this way. If you can drive a car, you can operate a semi-automatic. There's far more features on a vehicle than there are on a semi-automatic firearm, no matter how many features are on them. So they're actually pretty simple. You just got to know what those features are on the firearm. So again, pros and cons. It could be overwhelming to some people. Having the ability or the strength to rack a slide is sometimes challenging for people. But we're going to talk about using the slide here in just a second. But then, of course, you have a large magazine capacity, which is a huge advantage for your semi-automatics. All right, so now we're going to kind of talk a little bit about caliber. Now, there's been some theories about using a firearm that has a larger caliber as far as a heavier round. Before, personal defense ammo, such as your hollow points, ammo that is designed to either flatten when it hits something solid or human tissue, or ammo that is designed to fragment when it hits human tissue, are actually a huge advantage. And the purpose of personal defense ammo is basically for over-penetration. If you're shooting someone up close, the ability of a round to pass through someone, if it's not self-defense ammo, is very likely. And of course, you are responsible for every round that comes out of your gun. And I look at it this way: there's an attorney attached to every round that comes out of your gun. So make sure that even if you do hit your target, if you're not using self-defense ammo, that round could pass through people and hit a target or something beyond what you're shooting. So shot placement is important, and again, using the type of ammo for personal defense is also vital. Now, 9mm is about a good size caliber for most personal defense, whether it's concealed carry or home. A 9mm has good effective power. It has good defense power. It's kind of the go-to when it comes to self-defense ammo. Also, 9mm is actually easily accessible, and it's reasonably priced at this point. Now, one size below that is 380. A 380 caliber is also good for personal defense, and then one step above that is going to be your 40 caliber and your semi-automatics. It's also great for personal defense. However, I would not recommend going too far past 40 caliber, such as your 357, your 45s, only because it's at close distances. Those are large and heavy rounds, and they have a better opportunity to pass through people versus something like a 380, a 9, or 40 that's using self-defense ammo. So that's just a recommendation. I'm not saying that you can't use a 357 or a 45, but you got to understand the ballistics of ammo. Self-defense ammo larger than a 45 or like a 357 just has a higher likelihood of passing through human tissue. And that's just something that you don't want to have happen. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about your features or accessories on your firearm, and these are just recommendations. Now, there's a lot of people that are looking at red dot sights, or what we also call holographic sights. There's some pros and cons to them. I think that red dot sights, I'm still trying to get comfortable with them myself. I kind of grew up in the military and law enforcement not using red dot sights. I've always just used my fixed sights, and they worked well for me. However, I have been doing some research on red dot sights, and there's some good information on red dots. So I decided to put one on my SIG, and I've been working with it now for about 2 months, and I'm really starting to acclimate of finding the dot when you're using your red dot sights or laser sight. And if you're going to use a laser, I wouldn't recommend getting too comfortable using your laser, because if, say for instance, your laser doesn't work, if the batteries are dead, you're going to have to fall back on using your iron sights. And so if you're going to use a red dot, same thing applies, is if your battery is dead and you can't see that red dot in there, you're going to have to fall back on using your iron sights. So again, I'm not saying that you can't use a laser sight or a red dot. I'm just saying that you still should get comfortable with using your fixed iron sights, is because they're going to be your fallback if your electronics fail during a gunfight. Now, I will highly recommend gun lights. We have a variety of different ways that gun lights can be put on guns. This particular one is made for this Kimber Micro 9. As you can see, it fits comfortably onto the trigger guard. This particular one has both a gun light and a laser on it. So not only I can see my target, but I can also put a red dot onto that target as well. Gun lights are important is because if you, say for instance, are going to have to use your firearm in personal defense at night, which is a higher likelihood that you're going to have an attack, is going to most likely be at night. Whether it's concealed carry or home invasions, they typically happen at night. Two reasons why I recommend having a gun light on your firearm is because, one, it gives you the ability to positively identify your target so you know what you're shooting before you pull the trigger. Also, if you put light into someone's face, imagine when you get a picture taken and someone using the flash, you're going to have 3 to 5 seconds of what they call of temporary night blindness. That's when your pupils dilate and then they constrict, and it takes a while for you to get your vision back. Well, the same thing applies if you put a gun light in someone's face. If it's the perpetrator, it's going to make it very difficult for them to see you, especially if they're shooting as well. So there's two huge advantages of having a gun light mounted on your gun. Now, please understand, your gun lights are used for shooting only. They're not used for looking or searching. That's what flashlights are for. I would recommend taking a gun class so you learn how to use your gun light effectively. And we have classes for those as well. But I would definitely strongly encourage you to put some type of a gun light onto your firearm. Now, also to keep in mind too is once you mount a gun light onto your firearm, then it might be difficult to find holsters that will accommodate both your firearm and your gun light. So when you go to find a holster for your firearm, I recommend that Amazon is kind of my go-to. If I can't find on Amazon, then I may have to go to some other online store to purchase a holster that goes with my firearm and my gun light. So if you go to Amazon, here's what you're going to do. First of all, you're going to type in, say for instance, the gun that you're going to be using, and you're going to type in, since this is the 6-hour P320, I'm going to type in 6-hour P320 light bearing holster. And what that's going to do is going to bring up holsters that not only fits my firearm, but also fits the light that I'm going to mount onto it. So as you can see, this is the TLR7 gun light, and the TLR7 gun light not only fits this holster, but the gun also fits the holster as well. So if you need some more information about that, obviously just reach out to me and I'll show you what to look for when you're trying to find gun lights that's going to fit your guns. Okay, so last but not least, price. Now, what I typically tell students in class when they're going out to search for firearms is you don't have to go out and buy the most expensive gun that's on the market. Just because a gun costs $1,000 is not going to make you a better shooter. Your average price for your firearms is going to be somewhere around $500 to $700. Could be a little bit more, could be a little bit less, but the average price is going to be around that $500 mark. And that's very, very reasonable when it comes to most firearms. Do your research. Go to YouTube, look at some of the reviews of different types of firearms that are available to you, and trust me, there is a lot of different firearms to choose from nowadays. So you really kind of have to kind of narrow your shopping list down to size, caliber, ease of use, and some of the features that are on it, and of course price. And I would suggest maybe looking at maybe 5 or 6 different firearms that you think fits your needs, and then go out and start searching for those firearms. There's a lot of good recommendations out there if you talk to gun dealers. I can also send you a list of recommendations on firearms that I have either personally or that I've used personally or just come highly recommended. So if you need a little direction with that, please feel to reach us at k1risk.training@gmail.com, or you can also go to our website at k1risk.net. Again, thank you for your time. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Have a good day.